Napoli fans around the world, welcome to Napoli Talk. This video is a season review of all the players, and we're going to give a score to each one of them because before we start off next season and before we start talking about transfers, it's important to remember who played well and who didn't. Now, before we start giving each player some ratings, let's just remember how crazy of a year this was. So we had two different managers, we had the mutiny, we had different things such as coronavirus interrupting the season. So let's keep that into consideration when we analyze the players. And obviously, because we have so many players, two different coaches and the club to analyze, this is going to be a two-part series. In this first episode, we're going to be talking defenders and midfielders. So let's start with the fullbacks, and we start off with Di Lorenzo. I'm going to give him a 7.5. Di Lorenzo had a fantastic start of the season, maybe one of our best players with Ancelotti. He was going well forward, great defensively, even substituted Manolas or Koulibaly in centre back when needed, and he always played well against the big teams, against big players. Overall, he concludes the season with 3 goals and 7 assists, so well done to Di Lorenzo. Up next is Hizai, who's had a better year than last year, solid defensively, but really lacks going forward. He concludes the season with 0 assists, but crazily enough, 1 goal after 193 games. So well done Hizai for that, but we need more from him. So let's move on to our left back, Mario Rui. I'm going to give him a 7. He had a fantastic season, a really big improvement year after year from Mario Rui. He concludes the season with only 2 assists, but that stat doesn't show all the times he gave beautiful passes to Insigne or Milik and they got wasted, or those passes then led to goals. And if only we had 11 players with the motivation that Mario Rui puts onto the field, then maybe Napoli could have had a better season. As for Marquit and Gulam, I'm not going to give them any score because they didn't play because of injuries, and we really missed them this year. Hopefully next year they can be back to full fitness, or the club finds a way to replace them. Now moving on to our centre backs, and let's start with Koulibaly. And I could make a whole separate video on Koulibaly, and in fact I think I will, regarding the transfer rumors about him. His year started off really badly with that own goal against Juventus. It gradually got worse with that slip against Parma, in which he also injured himself, and he never really recovered. A few decent games here and there, and then again a really bad one against Messi recently in the Champions League. Mentally, physically, tactically, technically, not the same player that he used to be last season, and we really either need to recover him or we need to sell him. Another detail to note is that he concludes the season with 0 goals, and a really good defender, a really good centre back, usually has at least 3 or 4, and those are the type of goals that players like Van Dijk, Bonucci, Ramos score throughout a season in order to gain those extra 3, 4, 5 points. Now, from one of the biggest disappointments of the season to one of the best surprises, Maksimovic, he gets a 7.5, often coming on to replace either Manolas or Koulibaly, but actually he's the player that adapts better to either one of them. And it's a shame that maybe he didn't start against Barcelona, because he did have a very good first leg. It's also a great credit to him that we won the Coppa Italia. Fantastic performances against both Inter and Juve. So well done to Maksimovic. Hopefully next year he gets even more playing time. Next is Manolas with a 6.5. Experienced centre back, scored 4 goals for Napoli this season, and he managed to gain us 5 points with those goals. He showed great determination throughout the season, sometimes a motivational leader for the team. No huge mistakes that I can remember, but also he didn't perform as well as he was with Roma last season. And finally in defense, Luperto, 5. He didn't have that many games. He was called upon a few times with Ancelotti, but every single time he played, it was evident that he's not at the same level technically and tactically as the other Napoli players. Now moving on to the midfielders, let's start off with the biggest disappointment, maybe worst player of the season for Napoli, Alan. So Alan is not the same player ever since he was linked with PSG 2 seasons ago. But what's worse about Alan this year is his performance off the field as well. Off the field, he was a true disaster and even somewhat toxic. He was one of the main protagonists in the mutiny and even allegedly slapped De Laurentiis' son. On the field, he did score a few goals, some of them very important, but not enough, and we really missed his recovery of the ball as much as he used to in previous years. I think it's quite obvious that the club will try to sell him this year, and it's unfortunate because he was once one of the best midfielders in Europe. Alright, now let's go to Fabian. I'm going to give him a 6.5. So his stats are not the type of stats that we expect from a player of his level. He concludes the season with 3 goals and 6 assists. It's not great, but at least some of his goals were really important, such as the one against Inter in the first leg of the Coppa Italia. Moreover, in the first part of the season, he was sacrificed in Ancelotti's system when he was playing as a defensive midfielder. Instead, Fabian needs to play closer to the box, and we've been getting that from him recently with Gattuso. So I think that next year we can expect a few more goals from him. Now let's go on to Zielinski. Again, a 6.5 for him, but mainly because of his motivation, his determination, and the amount of effort that he puts into every game. But if we look at the stats, they are really poor. 2 goals and 4 assists. He has the potential to reach 10 goals a season, 10 assists a season, a sort of Marek Hamsik. But if we take a look at the last 3 or 4 seasons he's played with us, has he actually improved? Compare his performance against Barcelona to his performance against Real Madrid 3 years ago. Have we noticed any difference from Zielinski? I don't think so. And it's a real shame because, as I said, I thought he could be the next Hamsik. But we're getting to the point where we keep saying next year he'll deliver, next year he'll deliver, and he's never really reached those heights. He still remains a great player. He's so good at getting us out of tricky situations in defense and connecting the defense to the attack, but he needs to score more goals. And another 6.5 goes to Elmas, the youngest player in our team, first season with us. And I don't think he disappointed at all. So he hasn't scored many goals, hasn't assisted much, but he didn't play a lot. He only played half of the Napoli games, and of that half, he only started half of those. So he really didn't get a lot of chance to shine, to show his worth. But most of the time that he did play, he was doing quite well. And I think that because he's only 20, I think in the next year or 2 years, he'll be a great player for us. And if I were Zielinski or Fabian, I would be really worried about my spot in the starting 11 next year. Now let's go on to Demme, and I'm gonna give him a 6.5, but maybe he was the most important player for Napoli this season. I mean, if we take a look at the very first games that Gattuso had with Napoli, he couldn't get his system, the 4-3-3, to work because we didn't have a natural center midfielder. When Demme came, the music changed. We started winning, we started playing the ball, we had much more equilibrium, and he was maybe one of our best players right until lockdown. After lockdown, he kind of lost himself, but I think that once he recharges in September, he'll be back to what he was. And finally, we have Lobotka. I'm gonna give him a 6. At the end of the day, he's neither as good as Demme recovering the ball, and offensively, the times that he did play, he was good. He had a few really good passes, a few really good plays, but again, wasn't decisive with any goals or assists, and we need a bit more from our midfielders. So I'm going to give him a 6, but again, it was his first few months with Napoli, so I think next year he might do a bit better. Overall, I think he's a good squad player to have. Okay guys, that's the end of part 1. Next is going to be goalkeepers, attackers, and the club, including comparing Ancelotti with Gattuso. So if you've liked this video, then smash that like button and subscribe to the channel in order to watch the part 2. And as always, Forza Napoli sempre!